How scapegoat survivors can unmute their need for help. Does the prospect of asking someone for a favor seem terrifying? If you survived childhood as the scapegoat to a narcissistic parent, then this makes a lot of sense. There's no room in the scapegoat identity to legitimately ask for help. The prospect of doing so can feel alien and sure to end in disaster. If asking for help seems like it will go badly, then it probably has in the past. You may be used to being seen as someone who's already taking too much. This is a common attitude that a narcissistic parent holds towards their scapegoat child. As convincing as it is for the child, it's a product of the parent's own selfishness and lack of empathy. Here's why. The narcissistic parent is acting as though they are more important than their child. And the parent expects the child to be aware of and attendant to the parent's needs at all times. If the child could be honest, they'd exclaim how exhausting and burdensome it all is. That is a reflection, accurate though it may be, that the narcissistic parent just could not handle. So the parent does something insidious to ensure that neither party knows who's really being selfish. The parent denies their awareness of what they're demanding of the child and unconsciously decides it's the child who is selfish and entitled. To cap it all off, they treat the scapegoat child like they are the demanding one until the child sees themselves the same way. So it's a triple whammy. First, the parent demands way more than any child should be required to give to a parent. Second, they deny that this is what they're doing. And third, they insist that the child is doing what they, in fact, are doing. So the scapegoat child is given the torturous message, give me way more than I give to you, and believe that I give you way more than you give to me. To share a reality with this parent, the scapegoat child must mute awareness of how unfair all of this is. In today's video, I describe why scapegoat children had to mute their needs for help. They were deliberately confused by their narcissistic parent who demanded everything from them, gave very little back, and acted as if it was the child who was the demanding one. This traumatizing sequence leads the scapegoat child to associate asking for help with intense shame. To survive, the child must mute their needs for help from other people. Instead, they learn to rely solely on themselves in life, becoming constant DIYers. If they do receive help, they must be ready to pay it back 2 or 3-fold. And I encourage you to watch until the end because I'll explain how you can unmute your right to help today. This process involves recognizing how you had to miscalibrate what amounts of help you deserve. Today, you can practice knowing what you deserve by asking for more than before. This time, however, you'll do so in new, safe relationships. The results will likely be better, but it can take some time before your entire system is convinced. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a practicing licensed psychotherapist in California and a scapegoat survivor myself. I've worked to understand what helps scapegoat survivors know that they are now safe to unmute what is true to them. This includes unmuting their desires, their needs, and their judgments of what's going on around them. And I have found that the 3 pillars of recovery have been particularly helpful for people to unmute in this manner. Pillar number 1 is to make sense of the narcissistic abuse so that you can know it was not your fault. Pillar number 2 is gaining distance from narcissistic abusers and closeness to safe people. And pillar number 3 is to live in defiance of your narcissistic parents' rules. Taken together, these pillars empower you to know you can now be safe to unmute and live with the volume up on who you really are, what you really need, and what you really think. If you'd like a low-cost option to understand and apply the 3 pillars of recovery in your own life, then I'd like to suggest checking out my Rise and Reclaim Healing Toolkit for Scapegoat Survivors. In it, you'll receive my book called Growing Up as a Scapegoat Child to Narcissistic Parents, A Guide to Healing. This book is a comprehensive and in-depth guide to the 3 pillars of recovery. If you're a scapegoat survivor, you'll likely find a lot of your own experience in these pages. Most important, you will see how to apply the 3 pillars so that you can reclaim the quality of life you deserve. In the toolkit, you'll also receive a worksheet that asks you to brainstorm ways to apply the 3 pillars on a monthly basis in your life. You can find the link to the toolkit in the description box below or by clicking here. Why asking for help is so dangerous for the scapegoat child. Help is not part of the scapegoat child's world. This happens for 2 reasons. First, the narcissistic parent distortedly sees the child as the source of that parent's unhappiness in life. Such parents must do this. They lack the psychological strength to face their own unhappiness. They unconsciously fear they could be swallowed up by these feelings. So instead, they blame the child in the role of scapegoat for their unhappiness. And the blame is not for specific actions that the child commits. It's for being who the child supposedly is. If the child is to blame for the narcissistic parent's unhappiness, then what right does that child have to ask for help from this parent? When very young, a dependent child has no other choice but to ask for help. They need help being fed, cleaned, and clothed. And they have many emotional and psychological needs that they need help meeting. Scapegoat children get humiliated when they ask for help from a parent who is hostile to their needs. The narcissistic parent reacts to the child as if they are an extreme burden, greedy, and wholly undeserving of the help they seek. This creates a sudden break in the relational connection to the parent. They are met with rebuke where they hoped for a compassionate response. The child has to change their view of themselves from someone who deserves help from a loving parent to a needy and burdensome child who asks for too much from that parent. When this kind of sudden change in self-view occurs, shame floods the child. Instead of being the subject they know themselves to be, they are thrown into being the putrid object their narcissistic parent sees them as. Such shifts from feeling like you're a subject to being the object in a hostile person's eyes is what leads to the emotion of shame. Suddenly, we're without needed contact with the other person, and that's when the kind of toxic, nauseating feelings of shame come in. If you'd like to learn more about the role of shame, how it develops, and more about its mechanics, particularly in the life of the scapegoat child, then I encourage you to check out my series of 2 videos on the topic, which will be in the description box below or by clicking here. The second reason the scapegoat child can't ask the parent for help is that the parent has to hide their own entitled neediness in the child. It could be plain to see that the narcissistic parent demands far more from the child than they give. However, such an observation would reflect poorly on that parent. They're just too psychologically fragile to take accountability for this. So instead, they claim that another reason the child makes them unhappy is because the child asks too much of the parent. Scapegoat children are often familiar with being told something like the following: you just take, take, take. What do you want now? You are so selfish. All you ever do is think about yourself and what you want. The world doesn't revolve around you. These statements get expressed with complete certainty by the parent. They convince the child that they somehow need and ask for more than they deserve from the parent. What goes unacknowledged is that it's the parent who needs and demands far more from the child than the parent deserves. Well, let's illustrate this with an anonymized case example. Allie's stomach would always clench up whenever her mother was around. Allie knew she was in the presence of an adult who mercilessly saw her as someone who made their life worse. That knowledge had to be unconscious, though, throughout Allie's childhood. Yet her clenched stomach knew and told the tale that her conscious mind could not. When Allie was 6 years old, for example, she was expected to tie her shoes. Whenever she tried to do this around her mother, she'd get extremely nervous. She could feel her mother's eyes on her, boring into her like sunlight through a magnifying glass. Allie felt overwhelmed at the demand that she do something she didn't yet know how to do. In addition, she knew that if she took longer than her mother had patience for, then Allie was going to be in a world of even more pain. What hurt Allie most was her mother's betrayal of her role as parent in these moments. Allie's instinct was to ask for her mother's help in tying her shoes. But Allie had to mute this instinct and instead try her best to keep her mother happy with her. This proved impossible when it came to tying her shoes in such trying moments with her mother. Hurry up, Allie, her mother barked at her. I know, I'm sorry, Allie stated. I already showed you how to do this, Allie. What's wrong with you? Do you expect me to do everything for you? Her mother rhetorically asked. I know, I'm sorry. I forget what to do after I've made the first loop, Allie pleaded. Move your hands out of the way, Allie. Darn it. When I teach you how to do something, you better pay attention next time. Allie did as she was told and felt like she was crumbling on the inside. She hated herself for being so supposedly incompetent. She assumed her mother had no other choice but to get so frustrated with her. Anyone would be frustrated with me like this, Allie thought. I'm just so bad at learning what people try to teach me. How the scapegoat child survives by muting their needs for help. The scapegoat child must forbid themselves from asking their narcissistic parent for help. The shame they'd experience otherwise would be too much to bear. One way the child can do this is by adopting unconscious beliefs that align with how their parent treats them. Belief number one, others' needs are more important than my own. When a scapegoat child operates from this belief, they're compelled to attend to others' needs for help far more than their own. And this melds well with what the narcissistic parent unfairly expects from them. Now, if the child feels burdened by their narcissistic parent's constant demands for emotional caretaking, that reflects on the child, not the parent. The child must overcome any weariness from trying to meet the parent's needs. The child doesn't deserve compassion for getting tired from all of this. All that counts is what the parent, not the child, needs. Belief number two, if I ask for help, then I burden others. This belief protects the child from the shame of asking a narcissistic parent for help. It cautions them against doing what would so often lead to the parent's contemptuous rebuke. If the child's needs for help burden others, then why express them? They will only be met with an eye-rolly exasperation that will make getting the help feel far worse than doing without it. Taken together, these two beliefs effectively mute the child from asking for help. They undermine the child's basis for asking for help and predict disaster if they do. Well, let's go back to Allie. Experiences like the shoe tying episode made Allie want to stay away from trying things that she wasn't automatically good at, things that she might need help to get good at. It felt too bad to be criticized and put down the way her mother did to her in such moments. Allie unconsciously realized that if she stuck to helping others instead of seeking help for herself, she'd feel a lot less endangered. So she began looking around her to see who might need help. If she were at home, she'd see if her younger brother needed help with his homework. Or if her mother came home from a trip to the grocery store, Allie would run out to the car to help her bring the bags in. She'd spring up out of her chair at the end of dinner to help clear the table. As she got older, she took to washing the dishes and putting them in the dishwasher. It's only problematic in this context where Allie was expected to provide help and expect none. Living this way spared Allie the humiliation she'd face whenever she asked for help in her family. The cost was that she had to mute her own needs for help. What life without help feels like to the scapegoat survivor, a constant DIYer. The adult scapegoat survivor learned that they can only safely rely upon themselves. Doing so spared them the humiliation and resulting shame of asking their parent for help. It also helped them to keep moving forward in life. And I think this is a big part of the strength that's referred to when speaking of scapegoat survivors. Every invitation from their parent was to collapse under the devaluation, deprivation, and domineering the child was victim to. Again, this refers to the 3 Ds, which are the fundamental ways the narcissistic parent treats the child to convince that child that it's the child who's worthless, not the parent. Scapegoat children who coped by turning to themselves and swearing off outside assistance had to possess the ability and internal resources to do so. Sure, this survival strategy makes it hard to have a good quality of life in adulthood, but it ensured survival when that was not certain in childhood. And not every child has the internal resources necessary to do this. All that said, adult scapegoat survivors see themselves as the only person they can depend on. They may not even think to ask for help where they might benefit from it. When they think about others in their life, they may only think about whether they're meeting those other people's expectations. And then when they think about themselves, they may only ask if they're doing everything they need to do to keep themselves afloat in life. If the answer is no, then they'll have no one to turn to or hold accountable but themselves. Mute their anger at the abuse. At some level, the scapegoat child and survivor is keenly aware of the unfairness they face. They have had to give everything to their narcissistic parent, then be told that they're taking everything from them. Their exhaustive contributions to the parent go thankless. Then they must suffer the false accusation that they don't appreciate all the parent gives them. I can't think of a more infuriating arrangement. The scapegoat survivor, though, has learned that expressing their anger at such treatment goes very badly. Getting angry would violate the 2 beliefs that they were forced to adopt. So they must split off their anger from their awareness. It's just too dangerous to consciously entertain. When we have to mute a central part of our experience, it leaves consciousness but feels like it's everywhere else in the world. The scapegoat child and survivor who's forbidden from feeling angry can find anger in everyone else towards them. It's hard to feel safe in life when you can't use your own anger to defend yourself if needed. In addition, it can seem like others are angry with you nonstop. Well, let's go back to the case of Allie. She knew that she was the only person she could count on in her life. In high school, she devoted all of her time and energy towards getting good grades. She had good intelligence, and this felt like a domain in which she could be in complete control. If I study hard enough, she reasoned, I can get all A's without having to ask anyone for anything. So, her nights and weekends were devoted to studying. Her social life had to take a back seat. Every quarter, when she brought home her report card, her mother would commandeer it. She'd scrutinize Allie's performance, looking for any reason to criticize her. Allie would often bring home all A's, so there wouldn't be much to criticize. If she didn't, then her mother would berate her for slacking off. Of course, her mother would never offer Allie help in studying to raise her grades. That was expected to be entirely up to Allie. One day in Allie's junior year of high school, she brought home all A's except for a B+ in her hardest course, AP Physics. Allie had studied extremely hard that quarter to get that grade. When her mother started in on her for not getting an A, Allie just snapped. She exclaimed, "You don't know how hard this course is. In fact, I don't even think you yourself could do well in this class." Allie had never spoken truer words. Yet, as soon as she finished saying them, she was terrified at what she'd done. She knew her mother was going to come back at her with a vengeance. Her mother retorted, "You are not to talk to me that way, young lady. You are grounded for the next month or until you can learn to speak to me with the respect I deserve." Her mother made no mention of the way she had provoked Allie into reacting this way. Allie realized she had better keep her anger under wraps with her mother. Nothing good would ever come out of showing it to her. How to unmute your need for help from others. The formula for unmuting your need for help is simple. Practicing it is hard and requires a lot of reps before it feels safe. Here it is. Step number 1, find a relationship with a safe enough person. Scapegoat survivors need to find and get close to people who are much more generous in spirit than their narcissistic parent. Only then will it be possible to do what you need to do to learn you are now safe to unmute your need for help. If you're unsure how to identify who is safe, then I can offer 2 options. There, you can be largely assured that you will be interacting with someone who is safe. The second is my online course called A Map to Recovery from Narcissistic Abuse. In Module 4, I go into depth on how to identify safe people as friends and partners. And you can find the link to the course in the description box below or by clicking here. Step number 2, practice asking for more help than usual. Next comes the hard part. Here is where you get to teach your mind and body that what used to result from asking for help no longer does. In the safe relationships you've established in step 1, you can work to catch when you mute your desire for help from these other safe people. When you notice this, you can experiment with asking them for help anyway. What happens? I suspect the most common result will be an enthusiastic willingness to help you. Even when they can't help, there shouldn't be the same rebuke and shame that you used to get from your narcissistic parent. And this is all more easily said than done. But as you accrue more and more of such experiences, it does get easier. Let's go back once more to Allie. Once she got to college, the distance from her mother gradually opened up new options for her. She got along really well with her roommate named Lucy. They would eat most of their meals together. Allie found Lucy easy to talk to. They laughed a lot together. Allie was astonished to hear Lucy talk to her mother on the phone. Lucy seemed so comfortable and had no problem telling her mother what or if she needed help with. What even further blew Allie's mind was that Lucy's mother seemed to want to help her in whatever way she could. One night, as they were getting ready for bed, Allie asked Lucy about this. She said, "Hey, I noticed you seem to have a really good relationship with your mom. Is it always like that, or is she different when it's just the two of you?" "Oh yeah, we've always gotten along really well." "Wait, what do you mean? Why would it be any different if it was just the two of us?" Lucy said. Allie explained, "Oh, because I thought maybe she was just acting that way towards you because she knew I was listening. Like my mom would never be nice to me just because. That would only happen if someone else was watching us." Lucy turned and looked at Allie and said, "Wow, I'm sorry. That sounds really hurtful." Tears welled up in Allie's eyes. She felt the hurt that she'd been carrying and pushing away for so many years come back to the surface. But this time it felt a lot safer to feel these feelings. She knew Lucy was there for her. Lucy saw this happening and moved towards Allie to give her a hug. Allie surrendered to the feelings that were there. After a few moments, Allie scanned Lucy to see if she seemed annoyed at having to help Allie sort out her feelings about this. And Lucy showed nothing of the sort. This was the first of many instances between Lucy and Allie that led Allie to recalibrate her sense of how much help she deserved in relationships and friendships. She would experiment with asking Lucy for small favors, such as helping her study for calculus tests. Of course, she also continued to help Lucy in most of the ways Lucy might ask. For the first time in Allie's life, she experienced a sense of reciprocity in the amount of help she gave, but could also ask for. Well, I hope you found today's video useful. And I want to thank you for tuning in and your continued support of the channel and the resources around it. And again, every week I say it, and every week I mean it, but it's the comment section and the recognition and validation, I think, offered to one another, as people, I think, courageously talk about their own experience, as it relates to maybe some of the content in these videos, but and also ask some very helpful and thought-provoking questions, and comments about the video content itself. And with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.